Well, good evening, everyone. It's time for another episode of Jeff Green's Drive Time Rant. Well, I think I've been thinking about the insanity of, the entire world. Culture, the government. It's absolutely incredible today. It's like what's up is down and down is up, and what's left is right and what's right is left. You know, it's just insane. It doesn't even make any sense. For example, the government, the United States government, let's just take the United States. $21 trillion in debt. And the Congress just recently, and President Trump voted, and more or less, I believe they passed the new budget bill, which is increases spending, of all things. No cuts. Let's, we're $21 trillion in debt. Let's spend more money that we don't have. How much sense does that make? Does that make any sense at all? I mean, in your own household, if you're buried in debt, what do? I mean, you sit down at the kitchen table and say, oh, look, honey, we're spending more money than we make. Let's spend even more money than we make. At some point, that comes to an end, right? I mean, your creditors eventually, you stop paying the bill. Nobody will extend more credit to you. You're done. Your goose is cooked. But not so with the federal government. Because why? Oh, because they have a printing press. They can counterfeit money legally. Of course, we can't do that. So the insanity continues. And, and because people out here don't feel it, in reality world, we don't feel it, because it really isn't reality world. The price hasn't, prices of things have been relatively stable. I mean, everybody knows. We all know the government's lying. We all know prices are going up. I mean, we do live in the real world. It's obvious. I can tell just over the last several years, the income that I had several years ago was probably, I'd say 25% less, maybe 30% less than what I make now. And yet, I really don't have any more debt or anything else, but, I'm still basically living paycheck to paycheck. So my expenses have no doubt gone up. I mean, it's obvious. You can feel it. It is. Food prices, utilities, all those things. Everything's going up. We know it is. Despite that the government and the Federal Reserve contend that, we're at a 2% inflation rate. They're lying. But anyway, so because we're not feeling it and they're not raising our taxes, and that, on another point, they passed a bill, a tax cut bill, right? And what did that do? It just enlarged the deficit, because now they have less money coming in and more money going out. So now you have a greater deficit. So much for Trump's promise to cut the deficit. But anyway, it's insane. That's what I was saying. It's just insane. But because Americans and because people out here don't feel it, because they're not being taxed directly to pay for all this spending, because the government can literally print money. It's just a matter of a few strokes on a keyboard, and hey, look, we got another $1 trillion we can spend. It's about as simple as that. A la the Federal Reserve. So, but the problem is that money, all that money printing, has an extremely adverse derogatory effect on everything. And ultimately, we will feel it. Right now, the financial markets are in such a gigantic bubble, the big, fat, ugly bubble that candidate Donald Trump talked about, which now, it's not a big, fat, ugly bubble anymore. Now it's, pounding my chest, Trump, look what I've done. Look at the stock market. Isn't it great? It's a great, big, even fatter, uglier bubble than it was before. But now he takes credit for it, which is pretty stupid. I'm just repeating what others have said. But the fact of it is, the Republicans and Trump taking ownership of this economy and of the stock market, the stupidity is stupendous. I mean, it's incredible how dumb these people are. They got to be dumber than a rock. I mean, anybody with more than 2 brain cells to rub together, it's obvious what's going to happen. You know? So, I mean, the big fat ugly bubble is going to pop. You know, so, but they've pumped all this money into these financial markets, you know, via the Fed and their money printing. And so, you know, so the stock market, the bond market, you know, the financial markets are in this massive balloon, and things are happening. I mean, things are happening in spite of, you know, the Fed says they're doing quantitative tightening, you know, so instead of doing quantitative easing, which, you know, depending on who you listen to, they really aren't, or they are, or whatever. Who knows? But at any rate, it's just nonsense. It's utter nonsense. And like I said, in the real world, you know, in your own home, you could never do these things that we're letting the government do. You know, it's just insane. You know, and everything from the government, the insane spending, the wars overseas, the never-ending. You know, they increased the military budget. What, $80 billion? Trump wanted 40. They gave him 80. At a time when the country is, you know, should be making cutbacks. We should be pulling out of these wars that have no value. They do nothing for our safety. They do nothing, you know, for us here at home. Nothing. I mean, why? I mean, why are we in Syria? Why do we care about Syria? You know, all we're doing is Russia is their ally. Well, you know, the more we're over there, I mean, it's like picking a fight with Russia. What do we want to do that for? I mean, Putin has made it clear now for really years. They have no beef with the United States. They don't want a war. Putin has said that in no uncertain terms. Meanwhile, all we seem to be doing is doing everything we can to provoke them. To provoke China. To provoke anyone we can provoke. You know, this is like, who can we provoke today? You know, that's the U.S. military-industrial complex motto. You know, let's make drop more bombs so we can make more bombs, and hey, that's the U.S. jobs plan right there, buddy. Destruction, death and destruction, jobs plan. Yeah, great. How long is that going to last? You know, it's insane. So anyway, I guess yeah, not offering any answer. Well, yeah, I will offer an answer. It's real simple. You know, number one. The Federal Reserve is the cause of all this, because without the Federal Reserve and the printing press, the government would have to tax you. You know, to pay for all this, they'd have to be, you know, what, charging, I don't know, stealing everybody's money to the tune of 70, 80, 90, maybe 100% of your income. I mean, how else could you pay for it? I mean, these massive spending budgets. I mean, it's incomprehensible, the amount of money that they're spending, and they just think it's okay. Let's spend more. You know, so, but the American people like it. They want it. They want it. They like being the bullies of the world. Look at us. They like to flex their biceps, you know, and say, whew, nobody gonna jack with the U.S. Well, you know what? That costs a lot of money. You know, you don't build those military muscles for free. And the thing of it is, you know, what we spend more than really more than every industrialized nation in the world put together on military. But it's not enough. We have to spend more. You know, that's what I'm talking about. It's insane. It's insane that the American people accept this. And then they keep voting for these same criminals to keep doing more of it. You know, it's like, you believe what they say when they're candidates? Are you nuts? How can you believe them? You know, I tell everybody says, well, who'd you vote? I don't vote. I don't vote for any of them. You know what? Vote for criminal A or criminal B? What? What's the difference? The results are the same. If you haven't figured that out by now, then you need to take off your rose-colored glasses and look through the lens of reality and see what's happening, because it's just blatantly obvious. It's obvious this pug nose on my face. You know, it doesn't matter which side, if you want to call it a side, because really they're not sides. They're the same. There's no difference. There's not a hair's breadth difference between a Republican and a Democrat, except at election time. You know, that's the only time there's a difference. You can count on that. Then there's a difference. Then it's like, oh, you know, Republicans, oh, we're anti-abortion, we're pro-life, you know, and vice versa on the other side, of course, you know, because they just play to their constituents, and that's all it's about. It's just a game. It's just a game, you know, and those issues that are near and dear to your heart, they just use those as a tool to get you to vote for them during election time, and then when they get in there, they do whatever the crap they want, you know, which is not what you want. You know, well, then again, it may be. You know, if you're part of the welfare state, you know, and you like getting those monthly checks, you like those food stamps, you like those, you know, women, infant, and children, you know, all that income from the government, you know, if you're making your living off the government, which, you know, like 50% of the people of the country are, you know, so you have 50% of the people of the country making their living off of the other 50% of the country. What do you think's going to happen? Well, they're going to keep voting for criminals, of course. You know, and that's why it's so close. Every election is so close, you know. You never know. It could go either way. And that's because it's a battle between these two sides. You've got 50% that believe in statism and that make their living off the state. And in the state, of course, in turn, where do they get their money? They don't produce anything, so they have to steal it. So they steal it from the productive 50%, right? Of course. You know, this is just logic, common sense. So, you know, I mean, that bottom line is, you know, if you believe in statism and you think the state should run everybody's life, and you want more interventionism, foreign interventionism, domestic interventionism, the government in every facet of your life, you know, keep voting for Democrats, keep voting for Republicans. Keep voting. Yeah, that keeps them going, you know. That's what keeps the whole system afloat. So, you know, it's going to end. And I'm convinced that there's no way that we can end it. It's going to end itself. Because it's just going to collapse from its own weight. So, you know, enjoy your monthly check while you can. You know, the corporate welfare, you know, it's not just the poor that take advantage. It's the very rich that take advantage. You know, all the way from regulation, that giant corporations, you think they're anti-regulation? It's not true. They love regulation because it keeps their competition, you know, at bay. As long as, you know, the big corporations, they can deal with the regulation. They can afford the regulation. They can afford to comply. But newer companies coming in, getting capital, then compliance, the enormous cost of compliance, you know, they can't handle it. So therefore, it keeps competition out. So multinational companies, huge corporations, they love regulation. Don't kid yourself. They love it, and the government is the creator of monopolies. You know, people think you got to have government regulation and to keep keep monopolies from forming. You know, not true. All monopolies are formed by government. Free market, in a free market, monopolies. You know, there are some that can be some natural monopolies, but guess what? You know, if a company does really well and they're making really good profit, you know, selling product XYZ, well, guess what? Next thing you know, there's going to be wise entrepreneurs saying, wow, look at that. And they're going to start doing it too. And then that company, and they're going to do it better and have newer equipment and better production practices and so on and so forth. And so Mr. Monopoly Company is no longer going to be a monopoly. You know, that's the way it works in a free market. So people don't understand these fundamental things about economics, and they think government's the answer for everything. Government is the answer for nothing except chaos and criminality, extortion, and a good way to live in tyranny and be broke. Because, after all, what would we do without the police who show up, 30 minutes after the incident happens? I don't understand why, anyway, all these things. I could go on forever. Well, anyway, I'm about 5 minutes from work here, so I will sign off on my rant. All I can say is, hopefully after this all comes to an end, if the Lord hasn't come back yet, all I can say is that people are educated enough and will listen to the voices of reason, like the Ron Pauls and the Peter Schiffs and many others. Lou Rockwell. There's lots of voices out there who have been warning about what's coming and have been pointing out the fallacy of the system, of those who purport and perpetuate the current system, but hopefully after it collapses, people will listen and we won't do it again. Unfortunately, man has learned from history. The man has learned nothing from history because we keep making the same mistakes. But hopefully, enough people will wake up and realize that, look, government is not the answer, as Dr. Ron Paul, former congressman, used to say. Government is not the answer. What did he say? Shoot, I can't even remember. Government's not the solution, it's the problem. Something like that. Mine went blank. Old man brain. Anyway, they're not. Government is not the solution. More government is not the solution. Government, in fact, one final note. I know I said I was going to sign off, but I lied. People think that more government, more regulations, what's needed. When the banking industry, screwed up, in 2008, and the mortgage industry and everything, they screwed up. So instead of letting them fail like they should have, because they were failures, they should have let them fail. No, there shouldn't have been no bailouts. It's ridiculous. But no, it's the only industry, and the government's the only industry, if you want to call it that, where failure is rewarded. In the free market, that wouldn't happen. In the government, if the FBI does a bad job, what do? They give them more money, right? If any government entity, agency, program, whatever, if it fails, no, the answer is no, let's shut it down. No, that's not the answer. That would make too much sense. No, we need more money. That's the problem. We need more money. Public schools, government schools, government indoctrination camps, as Jeff Berwick calls them. And that's what they are. That's really what they are. That's probably the reason I think like I do today, is because I did so poorly in school. I paid no attention, fortunately. Thank God. So I slept through most of high school. So I didn't get indoctrinated. I didn't get brainwashed. But anyway, that's another story. So, but anyway, in a free market, there's free market answers for everything. We could have free market security, and when they fail, guess what? They don't get paid. They do a bad job, they fail, they go out of business. So they have an incentive to do a good job. With the government, there's no incentive. They have an incentive for failure. In fact, it's nuts. Why do you think, all the way from the police, your local police, on up. It doesn't matter. They have no incentive to offer good service. Because the worse service they give you, the more money they make. The more money that the government will extort from the productive part of society to increase the government's budgets. That's how it works, folks. So if you haven't figured that out by now, and you're a grown-up, you should have. Shame on you. That's all I can say. Shame on you. Like Gomer Pyle used to say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, we've been fooled and fooled and fooled. It's time to quit being fooled. That's all I got to say. Have a nice day.